Okay, so you're tuned to Tru Thoughts, and I'm Rob Louis, and we've got a special guest joining us, and it's Simon Richmond, aka Palmskin Productions. Hello, Simon.
Hiya.
We have been talking before, but I'll do the obligatory. How are you? You're right.
Who's this?
Yeah. So yes, look, it's great to catch up with you. We're going to chat a little bit about the music that you're doing with us at Tru Thoughts and what that's about, and then we'll also get into your story of how you got involved in the music industry. You've been doing music since, I mean, my first release that I bought and played out was Palmskin Productions on Mo Wax, and then I've been following you and playing loads of your music ever since then. But yeah, well, let's start with where we're at today. How did we linked up? You got my email from
Jeffrey in Hastings, who I met through sea swimming, and somebody kind of said, "Oh my God, it was a really bizarre meeting. Actually, there's an artist in Hastings who was painting a huge tableau of women, kind of sirens of various sorts, luring men to their deaths on the rocks, and she was going to spend all winter painting it. And before she started, she needed some people to pose in the sea. And so the word went out to the various swimmers. Does anyone want to pose for this? And Jeffrey was organising it. And we had to put on ripped clothing and flail about in the shallows. And at that point, Jeffrey said something about Palmskin. And then I realised that he was doing music and blah, blah, blah. And I think he was just on his way to meet you. And Tru Thoughts have been in the back of my mind for ages about possible home for stuff and things. And then I'm such an anti-networker, and I never really approach people. And then I thought, oh, if Jeffrey's meeting someone, I said, oh, maybe mention, you never know. And then next thing I know, we were emailing. And
I said, yeah, I think he sent me an email actually, and then we got in touch. So I was really excited to get that email. As I said, I'm a fan. And then I guess, you sent. We've got this new album. Should we talk about that? So the album's. Yeah. Do you want to say a bit about the album and what it's about? And
it's called Other Times, and I guess what was behind the title was I've kind of, in different ways, I've got a kind of area that I tend to occupy creatively and musically, and it's usually involved stuff that goes down quite a long journey. I'm probably guilty of overthinking when I write and getting into loads of details and textures and layers, and I like things to morph. I like things long usually, and then I just got to a point where I thought I want to just do something else for a bit because it doesn't feel like this at the moment. And so I thought, okay, so there are other times when things are different, when you want to do something else. And for me, that was representing a bit like clearing my throat of like, I want to fling out ideas. I want them to be short. I want them to be beats based. I want it to be rhythmic. I don't want it to be too kind of, I hate saying kind of cerebral or intellectual, because I just don't believe in putting that label on music, but nothing too kind of thoughtful in the extreme. And I just started churning them out, and I wanted it to be spontaneous and to be about the energy of creating that moment, I suppose. And so actually what you've heard and what constitutes the album, which is 26 tracks, there's actually about another 24 that I did that are just sitting bubbling kind of thing. So it was actually quite an epic amount of work to kind of to churn out.
Yeah, and I remember, because I think that's what I was expecting when you said you've got some music. I was like, oh, I'm going to get some good epic things, and then you said that, and I was quite honest with you, because we get sent a lot of these sort of, I call them sort of beat tape, that sort of demo scene, and it has often it's loops and big samples, and for us we can't really do release that. And as much as I buy that music and like that music, the concept of it, I thought it's not going to quite work. But then when we were talking, you said, look, it's got musicians, it's just me really working in that sense. And I love the idea for us. It would be our chance to sort of do that. Like quite in this day and age, if I see a 26 track album, I'm like, what? I've got to put 2 hours aside to listen to that. But of course, in this concept of it, it's not that. It's just a brilliant listen. And
right.
and very, very different to I guess what you've done before. So part of this is that right? It was recorded in lockdown. Is that right? Or did you have
Yeah,
this idea
I mean,
before? Yeah.
it was, and I haven't mentioned this to you before. It was actually, so it started, I guess it was 2020, and I had this idea of a kind of, I mean, typical for me. I always have lots of concept ideas and then don't actually follow through massively with it. But I had this idea to start a kind of umbrella movement called 2020 Never Beaten, and it came out of my feeling of what was happening in this country post Brexit, the kind of polarization of what was going on in America, just this awful, like, deadening feeling that everything was just going to pot, and it was just a horrible atmosphere. And I thought, what I want to do is I want to keep creating, and I want to keep productive and not rest on any one thing. And I was thinking I'll pull in some other people, which I never did. But out of that, at the time, I was thinking, and I wrote a kind of mini manifesto, and I thought, I was ranting about, like I say, Brexit and the far right, and materialism, and waste in packaging, and what's happening to the planet, usual things. Thinking that's the worst that can happen, and then the pandemic hit, and so yeah, it was a kind of it was through lockdown to some extent, but
The seeds were being sown already,
the
and the
seeds were being
pandemic
sown,
just
and,
brought it
like,
all together. Yeah.
it's become a kind of industry cliche, hasn't it? That everyone's got their lockdown album.
Yeah.
But I suppose if you never stop working, it's inevitably a lockdown
Yeah.
album, because you've got to keep working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, at least it came out. I remember I was doing a panel a little while ago, and I think a couple of people running house or techno labels, and they were just saying all we were getting sent from the people we work with were ambient albums because of lockdown. So I think in a way, for us at Tru Thoughts, I get, the reality was some artists were able to sort of get it together in a good way through lockdown. Some artists weren't, which we totally understood. I mean, we didn't want to put pressure on anybody, and it was just that balance. And then as we all began to get used to it, the music began to come. But I guess what I've seen, at least from my side, is there's creatively there's been some brilliant music. I've never had so many demos come through, and by default, there's just so much brilliant music that obviously, like your album, it's maybe that opportunity to do things that maybe people wouldn't have done without lockdown. And I know there's an element that people think, oh, we're sort of forced to do this, but it's also, well, that might not be such a bad thing.
Totally. Listen, and look, the reality is, I don't make my entire living from interesting, creative 26-track albums. I write music for other people, for commissions, produce music for other people, and inevitably, if you're not lucky enough to be able to earn everything from your own, the thing that you love doing all the time, you have to spend time doing other stuff, and inevitably that means that your dream projects or your pure creative little gems get sidelined a little bit. And so yes, lockdown, when there was a break and there was a line drawn, it was a perfect time to think, right, actually now I can do my stuff, and I don't, because everything else has dried up. There certainly weren't any gigs, so the 2 or 3 bands that I would be gigging quite a lot, or the DJing I would have been doing, obviously there was all that time. I did take up spoon carving, but there's only so much time you can sit on your stoop carving a spoon before you think, shouldn't I be in the studio making that music I've been talking about for years? So yeah, I mean, in some regards, if you're in a position of privilege where money wasn't going to be terrifyingly hard, and you're in a safe environment, then lockdown, in some regards, for creative people with the right tools, like electronic musicians who don't need other people or space necessarily, it was a gift in a way.
And I think it's great. I'm enjoying this, and I think I've been saying that quite a lot to the artist on the label. Is like, let's embrace these lockdown albums. Some that actually came out, were recorded pre-lockdown and then came out through lockdown. And it's just like, I think we're going to look back in this time, and I guess there'll be some form of perspective that we'll see what's gone on in this time. I hope so. I'm hoping.
Yeah, so. And I think also it's not just a question of the material circumstances and people being actually physically inside, I think what also happened was a lot of people had a bit of a reckoning or a bit of a word with themselves and started recalibrating what they did and didn't want to do and what they were and weren't prepared to do. And I guess if you were lucky, again, and if you didn't have too much pressure and you were healthy, um, there was a chance to kind of get back in touch with yourself a bit. And I think a lot of musicians I know and a lot of creative people I know did that and actually came out of it with a bit more resolve and a bit more feeling of, oh yeah, yeah, no, I need to keep feeding this side of me, because it's not just about bringing in the money, and it's not just about survival, because if it is, then well, certainly music's not the industry to be in. It should be a plumber or an electrician, or which is no disrespect to that, not on a qualitative level, but on a financial level. If you're thinking I've just got to be about survival, then don't be making music in this country anyway.
And it was a brilliant time, wasn't it? I mean, and I guess even things like sort of the Black Lives Matter, and you can see even there was a bit more engagement politically of people just really finding their voice. I think, in this country, we're still trying to get, for the most part, Boris Johnson and Priti Patel out of power because they've got a bit nuts. But you can see there feels like a more, at least people, okay, we've got to do something. It feels like that, rather than, oh, well, what can we do? What can we do? I guess there's a slight thing. And I think I've seen that. I have a friend who works in a bank, and he was saying they've been struggling to hold on to staff, which they've never had. A third of staff is people, and they're getting people to come and new job, and then people are realising after, actually, I don't necessarily want to work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And so I think there's a lot of bigger things. So that with us in the music industry, you can sometimes be insular, but I think this is a bigger thing, isn't it, that's going on, that a lot of people are doing, isn't it?
So, I think also what happened is in various different quite important sectors, I was going to say the word ordinary people, but again that sounds a bit patronising, but the general public got more in touch with society and what society is about. So parents whose kids go to school were suddenly, actually, who may not have been that aware of the national curriculum or what kids were doing, were suddenly thinking, oh God, is this what my kid does at school? Do I want that for my kid? Is it good for my kid? Can I be more involved? Or people who perhaps hadn't been that engaged with what the NHS were doing were suddenly realising, holy moly, there's like a huge crisis here, and it's not the NHS's fault. And so I think there was a lot more social engagement in people who wouldn't have necessarily thought they were political. Who, okay, so the clapping for the NHS and all that stuff was a bit of a smokescreen, but people slowly began to realise, oh God, yeah, you can hold the government to account a bit, and ordinary life is political. People who would say, oh, I'm not into politics, who were suddenly couldn't find things on their shelves and were thinking, why has the supermarket got none of this? Funny, it's political, and they were realising that, and so that again, I think it has changed. It has changed a bit, and gives me a little bit of hope for alternate voices being heard in this country. I don't know.
It feels like that. I mean, even just talking about the political side, I mean, I'm definitely noticing a lot more music that, or it feels like that, just definitely talking about what's going on right now. That seems to be a little bit more than maybe it was before, because people are frustrated and the artists lyrically are able to do that. I know pre-lockdown, Chimpo did a track with King of the Road, like a jungle tune, and I asked him to just do it. I said, oh, can you just do a little diss on it? He did me a dub play. Can you do a little diss about Boris Johnson, which always used to go down well, but when the club's back opened, and then that line, it comes in twice, and the thing, like, everyone really cheered, and it was like, wow, this is just it's got a different level of engagement, because just generally, and it's quite, especially when we first opened, it's quite the sort of younger crowd in there as well. And it's like, oh God, it's just angry, and it's great. It's good that anger's there, because I sort of remember that when for my age, it was the poll tax time, when it almost felt like everyone's together and we all know this is wrong. And so
it's easy. I think it's easy to think that young people can be, like younger people can be, a bit more disengaged. But I think that might have been true 10 years ago for a while, and maybe, I don't know if that was that might have been the fault of New Labour being so bland and about kind of brand rather than substance. I don't know, but now I don't know. I mean, I don't know about post-lockdown, because I don't really go out that much, but I remember last year, or whatever it was, God, not last year, the festival year before lockdown, uh, I remember getting into this like impassioned debate with I think he was 18 about the Labour Party and whether there should be a split so that there can be a genuine socialist Labour Party and this was at the messy end of like 4 a.m. in a kind of electro tent at Shambhala, and I was just like, this is brilliant, this is so good. I mean, obviously it was one guy and maybe I attracted the kind of the nutcase, I don't know, but I think on politics and also on things like gender politics and on gender identity and race, it feels the one area I think is really positive in this country is the younger generation are kind of moving on from being too hung up about that and are able to discuss it and are able to assert themselves a bit more.
It all feels very positive, doesn't it? So it's all good. So I mean, I guess I'll bring it back to the music as well, because I guess other times, it's all that influence is within that. Just with that, I normally say to when I'm doing these interviews, choose one or two songs. But I guess with 26 songs on there, if people were going to get a little check into that sort of, what this album's about, what are the 2 or 3 songs you might say, look, just go and check these, and if you like those, give it a proper listen. What would you say? Or do you just say you've got to listen to it beginning to end? So
yeah, I would say Hagstone really does it for me. But when you listen back to music you've made, I always think of it as like scratching an itch that you've got, and then you listen back, and if it feels that you managed to scratch that itch, then you're not worrying about it anymore. And Hagstone really felt like the things I wanted to do with it did. And Hagstone, got to try and remember the titles as well. I'm terrible at remembering my own titles. Mermaid's Purse, I really
that's one of my favourite ones.
Because I've just, go-go rhythms for me have, I think, one of the first 12s I ever bought in Tower Records in Piccadilly in 86 or 80, might be 85 actually, was Mac Attack Art of Drums, which is an absolutely seminal go-go record. And so it was really nice to have a bit of go-go in there. What else? Fairlight Glen, I really like. Mostly just because of all of them. That's one that when I hear it, there's an imaginary MC flowing really, really well in it. And so it always just kind of makes me nod like that. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, God, there's Fetch. I think it's called Fetch, which has got a really nice kind of jazz piano thing going to it. Yeah, I suppose those ones would do it for me. Yeah,
but it is meant. I'll say that as well. It's meant to just so we're releasing it, and it's good for us. It's the first time doing something like this. It's 26 tracks, but they're all relatively short, and we're releasing it in a sort of mixed format as well as the individual tracks around there, because the concept of it is almost the mixtape, I guess, in a way, but all original music is.
Yeah, exactly. There's very, there's virtually no samples in there. And certainly no kind of, well, I mean, there's a couple of tracks which are obviously kind of cut up. That, that's the point. They're slightly more kind of DJ kind of, like deck kind of stuff. But apart from that, it's all. I mean, I've plundered my own archives quite a lot, and I've been quite lucky in that over the last 20 years or so. I've worked with quite a lot of orchestras, I've worked with lots of different musicians, and I've got a kind of bed of stuff that I've produced and I've written that I can take stuff out of. I'm also lucky because I play a few things, so I can, there's a knack to making something you've played in sound like it could be a sample, ways of cutting it, all those kind of things. So so it has got that kind of beat tape feel, but it's kind of bespoke, if you like, in the sense that the music has all come from me. And also, the thing that I'm really aware of in listening to beat tapes, and I was just listening to a few last night. I mean, for the most part, they're all, I mean, maybe I just don't hear the bad ones, but I'm always really impressed by all of them. And the same thing on Instagram, when you hear, there's all aspiring beat makers, and I always listen to them, and my instant thought is, God, that's much better than me. But you then actually listen to the track, and after 16 bars, you're thinking, okay, I've gone a bit bored now. And there's no musical idea, and the groove is brilliant, and the glitchiness is brilliant, and maybe they've got a little SP404 and they're doing the kind of stutter thing, and it's, you know, that's lovely. But actually, does it stand up as a piece of music? And I think the one thing that I value in myself, and I always try to exploit and use, is the fact that I am musical and I can write music, and um, so I've got this love of the kind of the cut up, sampled beat thing, but I can kind of provide my own samples for it, if you like.
Yeah, and it's brilliant. I mean, as I said, it's a really exciting release for us. I guess I wanted to mention, obviously, while we were doing that, we knew that was the idea. And then I was asking, have you got anything that we could maybe put out while this is all happening in the background? And then you sent me The Sword Will Die, which was like amazing piece of music. And, how would you describe that? What would what was...
Indulgent. I don't know. It's funny because, it's just, the mind game of music is so inescapable. I'm hideously insecure about stuff like The Sword Will Die, which is odd because it's all the kind of stuff that I do and I've always done. And maybe this is the value of also doing things like Other Times, which is I'll agonize about the long stuff and about the ambience and about, is the journey going somewhere? Is it got authenticity? Does it make sense to me? And I've also got a thing. It's a weird visual thing. When I'm working away at those things, it's like I'm chipping away at a piece of marble, or maybe not marble, maybe plaster or balsa wood or something less expensive, and I'm trying to get a certain shape in my head. It has to feel a certain way, and it's very visual in my head. And this goes for the longer pieces, and I work away at them, and I sometimes put them away, sometimes for years, because I can't quite get the shape, or I realise I've knocked the nose off it when I thought I had the face ready or whatever, and I absolutely agonise over it. And yet the things on Other Times, because it isn't necessarily where my comfort zone has always been, I felt all right making my own mistakes and finding new things and not fretting and deciding I can leave that, it doesn't matter. And so The Sword Will Die is one of my, it makes more sense in the progression of kind of Palmskin material, that's kind of stuff. So it's got the emotion, and it's got the kind of space at the beginning that I then like to then lock into a groove and then open up again, and it's got quite a big scale to it. I guess it's always emotion, isn't it? I mean, although even in Other Times, I mean, I would never say that it was emotionless, because I think if music's emotionless, it just doesn't work. But there's a kind of, I like to try and really, I suppose the two different things are, on something like The Sword Will Die, I like there to be a depth of emotion that has a kind of longevity to it, and something that you'll ponder. And with things in like Other Times, I like it to be kind of have some bite, to be like kind of chewy, but you don't necessarily want that in your mouth all the time. You just feel it, and it kind of tingles a bit, makes you nod, and then you kind of move on.
Yeah. It's brilliant. I mean, when I heard it, it was like, okay, so this is what I thought would be, I thought Other Time, but I of course I love Other Times, but it was like, and again, I think that's the one thing that I found with you, because as I said, over the years I've heard it was like, this sort of doesn't really, if you try and describe it to someone, it's quite difficult. And I think, especially in this day and age where it can be difficult to get people's attention, it's a track that really almost doesn't make sense unless you listen to it from beginning to end, because you need to get, and I like the idea that we're going to release something that we know is going to be hot. Of course, radio will be, well, what am I meant to, the more mainstream. I played it on, of course, I play it on the radio. I think the thing that really threw me, because we got it early, and with certain tunes, if we've got something that I think just may get missed, I always do a little sort of personal send out to a few DJs I know, and I sent it to, amongst others, Scruff, Mr. Scruff, and Gilles Peterson, and Kevin Beadle. And Scruff was DJing in, Mr. Scruff was DJing in Newcastle, and he messaged me, this is brilliant, I'm going to play it out tonight. So that really threw me, because I was like, oh, what? I didn't think. I just thought you're going to really like this, and you'll play it on the radio.
Must have
That
been
really.
a sit down gig.
And then I was doing Giles's show when we just before Christmas, and he was saying Kev Beadle. He was talking to Kevin Beadle, and Kevin Beadle said, "Look, have you checked the new Palmskin?" And then he checked it, and then Giles said, "You know, I've got to play this out. You know, when I'm back out DJing." And so there is a. I guess it really threw me because it wasn't something I had listened to, thinking, "Oh, that's a record that you'd play out." And I did try. I played it earlier, my Sonic Switch night, and right, of course, it's a little bit weird because people are going, what's going on for 5 minutes? But then, you know, it is.
I think that is something that is, it's probably, it comes naturally to me, probably not in a good way, in the sense that I love, like when I'm DJing, and certainly back when I was doing a lot more deep house DJing, you know, there's always a bit in the set where you want to throw people a bit and go off. And I used to have this edit that I made that it was the beginning of, I don't know if you know, Condition of the Heart by Prince off Around the World in a Day. It's this beautiful, it's almost classical, but it's got that weird little VL tone kind of old Casio thing, and it's got kettle drums, and it's overblown, but it's just this amazing thing. And I had the intro, which there was a little piano thing that I looped up, and then put Sandwiches by Detroit Grand Poobahs onto it, which is a kind of, you know, Detroit techno kind of slightly sleazy electro thing. And I remember DJing at Fabric on a free range night, and I think I was on after Shuriken, or can't remember. And anyway, the place was, you know, it was everything going well, you know, and I've queued up something really, you know, surefire. I think it might have been a Switch tune or something, and thinking, yeah, this is just and then the voice starts and it goes, play the Prince edit, plays the Prince edit, and I'm like, you can't, and it's like, you can, it will work. And of course I have to, and of course forgetting when I'd done it, you know, it's about 3-4 minutes before anything happens, and the whole place is doing that kind of, you know, with a few people kind of doing that and thinking like, what's going on? But then when it kicks, you know, if you're lucky, and I was that night, it goes off. And so I think quite often with things like The Structure of the Sword Will Die, I'm kind of doing that, which is, you know, you've got this very open ambient piano and textures and goat bells and the kind of weird treated harp, and it's all, but then out of that, it's like you've mixed in, right, I've begun to stir the water. It's kind of, and then the beat kicks, and I can understand in a way DJs liking that kind of thing, because it kind of does that job for them. They don't have to pick their random track and take a risk. Also, they can also just blame it on the track. But it is just that out of kind of something floaty, you've kind of gone in, and the groove takes off. So I'm working on a few tracks for the next album after Other Times, and they're much more going back to the vein of things like The Sword Will Die, which are longer, and they inevitably, I mean, because you can have beats all the way through if you want. You can have, you know, God knows there are house tracks, there's techno tracks, electro tracks that are 9 minutes of beats, but I like, you know, contrast. You can't, you know, you want a bit of emptiness, and I guess it's also because I want things to be not just dance floor. I want them to be listened to. And,
I think it's important. I mean, I'm of that school as well, and you know, of DJing, which you know, I almost feel if you haven't tried something that hasn't gone wrong. I play long sets, so you maybe haven't pushed it as much as you should do. And that I have that head in that voice in my head all the time. Should I or should I not play this? You've got to try, and I guess, I mean, I'm lucky I've got a residency, and I think when you have a residency, sort of people trust you. It can be a bit more nervy. I mean, I love, what was the track on Free Range? I've got it here. Hold on a second. Love Will Go. So I used to play this track all the time, and for the most part it would always go down well, but every now and then I would play it and it would just be okay and I don't know why, it just doesn't make sense to me. I didn't know why it didn't work on that, you know, maybe 1 in 10 times and it just never made sense to me. I was just like, how can I have everybody, but for the most part it works, and then it doesn't. And
I mean, not to deflect the blame.
Blame me for my
But that's also
selection.
that's the great thing about DJing, in the sense of, you can have your absolute, a chunk of the set where you've got 20 minutes, half an hour, that is just like it went off maybe 2 or 3 times, and then there's that third or fourth time that you reach for the same mix, and it's just not really having it. There's like, there's a track, there's a Contron track called Masculitis, really lovely kind of electro-y thing, and actually Jimster Jamie played it on. He was doing a what's that thing called? Is it Twitch? He was doing like a kind of live thing from his studio during lockdown, and had the cameras on and everything. And he played it, and I was always had it on the background, and my ears were kind of like, what is this? What is this? And I found it, and then recently I've played it a couple of times, and it had just been that thing of like, you can only go on yourself, and I'm just like, yes, yes, yes. And then I was playing somewhere out on the seafront, and I felt like people were kind of, they're shuffling a little bit, and it hadn't quite. And I was like, oh right, this is going to do it. And I did it like with kind of like, and it was like, oh, why isn't this? But this is the one. And it's like, no, because you never know. You don't know the context. It's same as I noticed you were playing Breaking Down, the Julia and Company.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there was a brilliant. I just moved to Hastings, so this would have been 8 years ago. And my daughter was 1 or something. So me and Rosie, my partner, didn't get to go out very much at all. And then we had this one night that was, Rosie's mum came and looked after Connie, and it was something called the St Leonard's Festival, which, we assumed was going to be pretty kind of underwhelming, which it was all right. But we ended up at a house party, which was just kind of, and we hadn't been out for ages. And so there was quite a nice sound system, and people were just playing off YouTube, and there was a laptop open, and there was a guy there who was just playing the most interminable chin stroking. I don't know what you call it. It was like glitch core hip hop kind of, it's slightly industrial, but he was there with his beard and his kind of trendy tats, and he just wanted to show that he absolutely had the kind of most cutting edge. And I remember I just kind of went, look, I just want to play one, and found Julia and Company. And suddenly, like, the entire house was just like, oh, this is, and he was glaring at me. And the second after, he went back to whatever it was. But that track, I don't think that track's ever failed me, ever.
Yeah, you posted, because I put up, I just did a picture of you. You posted, it's been in your record book since, forever. And
I guess. That London 12-inch is just...
Yeah. And it's funny, because that's one of the, it's one of those songs that I sort of every year, I'm going to have a listen to that. It's always good, and it always works, if you play it out as well. It's always that.
But it does have, again, it's that journey, because it starts, and if people don't know it, obviously if you're playing to a crowd that knows it, fine. But if people don't know it, it feels a little bit like, is this slightly kind of loungy, slightly cheesy? It sounds a bit soft. And then as it builds, and you're just like, and in times I've wanted to mix out of it. It's a tune you can't really mix out of, because it just won't let you. It's just because it's just building and building and building. It's great.
And it's got that brilliant end, isn't it? Powerful voice right at the end, and then stops, isn't it? It's like a good statement record. So and I guess, look, that's something with you. I guess I've always found that just a very interesting music, maybe, quite timeless music. I get, from my point of view, that you can always play, and it's interesting. I guess maybe that might be a good point. Maybe we could talk about maybe the sort of history of you. As I said earlier, my first introduction to you was through Palm Skin Productions, the Mo Wax release. And I used to run a night called Shake Your Wig on a Wednesday night, just while I was a student. And Light Brothers was just just as the club was beginning to fill up, I would play that, and we just begin to get, and it always went down really well. And, it's got like certain tunes have a personal feeling. I remember when Disco started going, I'll have a look what that's worth. That's got to be worth an absolute fortune, because it means so much, that song, because, some Mo Wax stuff is worth loads, and some it's like, what? how can this not be? Everybody should want this record in their collection. It was like, but it's brilliant. I still play it now, and it's brilliant. But was that your first? Was that your first? What was your first release?
That was the first. Yeah, that was the first Palmskin release. Yeah, I've done a couple of kind of slightly iffy white label things before, but nothing that ever did anything and was any good. Kind of college days, there was a kind of weird situationalist kind of techno-y thing, and I can't think, there was something else. I did a couple of things with Tony Wachuku, who was Attica Blues, and because we met at college. But I think that was just more me playing keys for him. So I think Palmskin, that was the first. Like Brothers was the first Palmskin release.
And then so you were involved? Is K Creative? Was that something you were involved with as well? Is that right? Yeah. So what? I didn't do any research before this. I didn't look at timelines or anything. It's just all that's in my head. So was K Creative before Palmskin or? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I'd left college and I had a kind of slightly iffy gig playing percussion, playing congas over DJs in a club in Earl's Court, in a basement. That was my kind of weekly thing. And I was on the enterprise allowance, which was that amazing scheme whereby you could still get housing benefit and some income support, but you were allowed to be trying to build your freelance career.
I think we've got Portisheads, came through that, and I think Ronnie Sires as well. Without that, we may not have had them. So
I'm the least successful iteration of that scheme. They don't put me up on the website. So I was doing that, and I was, clubbing every night. It was one of those. I mean, it was just that golden youth period of. I would cycle into the West End.
So this was early 90s?
This is early 90s. So this was like 89, 90, I guess. I'd cycle into the West End, and there was a place in Piccadilly Circus that you could get a slice of pizza and as much coleslaw as you wanted for £1. And I'd get that, and then depending on which night it was, and you'd know the doorman or the people doing the club, and so you'd be on guest list every night, and then drink water all night, and then go home. And there was one of the clubs I went to was the Fez at Praed Street. It was in the basement of, I can't remember what the hotel was called. It was right by Paddington Station. And that was Patrick Forge and Kev Beadle. And I think, I can't remember how I knew who I knew. Anyway, I used to go regularly. Anyway, one time I was in there with a friend, and Patrick was playing, and I said, oh God, I'd really love to, I just wish I was playing percussion in a club like this and not in the club in Earl's Court. And my friend said, well, just go and ask the DJ. And I was going, oh no, I can't. She said, go on, just go and ask. And so I went over and said to Patrick, oh, I'm a percussionist, and I'd be really into playing. I mean, if I did that to me now, I would very politely say, thanks, we're not taking right now, because actually I can't stand percussionists playing over DJs. But back then, that's what I did. So, and Patrick was lovely, and he said, oh, I'm working in Reckless Records. Why don't you come and have a talk to me? So I cycled in the next day, and he said, oh, you're a percussionist, are you? And I said, yeah. And he goes, oh, I know a band who are looking for a percussionist. Are you interested? And I said, yeah. And this band was K Creative, and they'd just been signed to Talking Loud, and they were about to go out live. They had a beginning, I think it was 3-4 dates in Europe, and they needed a percussionist and a saxophonist. And I got a call from, might have even been Gilles. I can't remember. I'm not even sure they had management at that point. No, they must have. Anyway, I got a call from someone saying, come down to this studio. And I turned up and kind of started playing, and that was it. And me and Chris Bowden, who I don't know if you know from his albums Time Capsule.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, so me and Chris got hired, and we spent the next 2 years touring and recording with K Creative, who of course had Ski Oakenfall. Ski and a guy called Zen. They kind of got signed. It was a really interesting band, actually, because the drummer, Jimmy C, went on to do Adam Friedland and Freak Power. V-Love, the rapper, amazing rapper and vocalist. He had a couple of brilliant projects. One called Scare Electric, really good. And yeah, and so we started doing that, and that was the kind of springboard, really.
Which is quite an amazing fast track, because really Talking Loud was apart from the major label world, isn't it? So you've gone from asking, can you play percussion, to really with an act that's got a budget behind it on a
Yeah.
major label, albeit very creative, with Gilles at the helm and all of that. So
Yeah, of course there was that moment though, because they just signed to Talking Loud had just kind of been bought by Polydor, and there was the famous meeting with whoever it was at Polydor, who Giles and Norman Jay walked in for the first kind of get together, and the guy said, "I don't want to hear the word jazz in the building." And there was this kind of like, "Oh, welcome to Majors," Of course, they went on, that big signing, the Roots and various other things where, obviously jazz influence was huge, and or the Brazilica stuff they did. So obviously, Giles is very good at not letting what he wants to do be sidelined, kind of thing. But there was also, I mean, you're right that it was fast tracking. But the other really lovely thing about Patrick was we became friends really, really quickly. And I'd just every day be down at Reckless, and I got such a musical education from him. He'd just be pulling out tune after tune after tune. I would just go, yeah, I'll have it. But he also then said, because he knew that I was a programmer and I was making music on a computer. And this was just, a little 2 meg Atari computer, which was what we used in those days, which funnily enough, when I went to buy it from Loot, I don't know if you remember Loot, the classified paper, no internet as such. I took Tony Wachuku with me, because he was the computer whiz. He'd done computer science or whatever it was at college. And we went along, and he knew the guy who was selling the Atari, and kind of, helped me out with that. And so I got into computer music because Tony had helped me with that. I then spoke to Patrick and said, yeah, he knew that I was doing that. And about 2 weeks later, he called up and said, look, I've got to do a remix of a guy called Vinx, who was he was like a percussionist singer. He was signed to Island, I think it was. And he said, do you want to help me with it? And I was like, yeah. And so we did that, and then we did a oh god, what were they called? UK hip hop. They did that track Kicking Jazz. I keep wanting to say London Posse, but it wasn't. Anyway, did another hip hop track, and out of that, I was kind of learning as I went, and got a kind of started getting my teeth into making electronic music. So I had this great kind of dual lane thing of really, really getting massively experienced in all the live stuff, and my percussion chops were really coming on, and touring, and honing that. But at the same time, and obviously it was a great living as well, because we were signed. They were signed as a deal, and we were permanent session players. So we were on a retainer.
Wow. Okay.
Really
so you
secure.
could be full time. You were just straight into full time music then, basically.
Straight in full time music, but also able to buy equipment. Yeah. So I got my first sampler. I got my decks. I got a drum machine. I got my 4-track tape recorder. Synths. It was all slowly building up, and also both Zen and Ski were masters of electronic music and computer stuff. We had a Roland sampler with the whole TV, old school big TV monitor on stage. There was the Juno that you loaded up with cassette before the set started, because that's how you saved sounds, to cassette. And so I was kind of taking all that in, but equally, it was fired up by a live drummer, and there was brass and the percussion and keys and Rhodes and all that. So it was a really, really great education for things to be bubbling around.
So what happened from there? What was the jump from that to?
They sacked me.
Oh, sorry to laugh. You're laughing though. So
yeah.
What was it? Was it change of direction, or they just?
It was one of those. Well, it was I don't know. It was budget, and they had a tour coming up, and there was I think it was a kind of production. They could have like a big lighting rig and something else, or they could have me and the management. I mean, it was classic musicians. I'd just been, because I still am good friends with most of them. I mean, I've just lost touch with others. There was never any falling out. And we'd just been on holiday, three of us. And I got back, and one of the managers kind of called me for a meeting, and it was all kind of slightly kind of under the radar. And I was like, "What's going on?" And he said this, and I was fine, and I was like, I went to the next K Creative gig and stood at the front just to freak them out, and then went backstage and I said, "Why didn't you? Should have just said it's totally." I'm like, "Oh God, we felt really bad." I mean, it was, but it was cool, and actually that was the catalyst for me thinking, right, I already had the kind of Palmskin concept. I had the name, I had the tracks I'd been making, and at that point I was like, you know what, I have to do something.
So they got the manager to tell you, they didn't tell you themselves. I see. I think I've a few times I've seen artists do that with musicians. I've said to them, look, in the long run, you're just better off doing it yourself. I know it's hard, but if you can do it, because I think it's always better, isn't it? If it's ultimately they know you've made the decision, even if you hide behind the manager, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But and again, we were we were in our like early 20s.
Learning, isn't it? It really is.
But it was great, and at that point, one of the record shops that I was going to all the time was Honest John's, because it was just over the Westway from where I lived, and James was working in Honest John's.
So that's James Lavelle, isn't it?
Yeah. And he'd started doing Mowax nights, and like Mowax was basically a kind of cardboard box in the back of the shop in Honest John's, and we just used to talk and hang out. And then I remember there was a club night called Kung Tung Fu in Covent Garden, and Patrick was doing it and James was doing it. Someone else, can't remember. And I took I think it was a cassette. It was either a cassette or a DAT down, and I demoed the 3 tracks that are on that like Brothers EP. And I just said, I was behind the decks chatting. I said, I think there's a track that would go down well. Can I play it? And I think it was James just kind of went, yeah, all right. And I put it on, and no one stopped dancing. And it was, it was a lucky one. And then he said, look, I'm starting up a label. Are you interested? And I just said, yeah, definitely. And
so that's pre him starting the label as well.
Yeah, because they just got the first one was something. Was it Repercussions?
Repercussions, I think, wasn't it? That was licensed in as well, I think.
That was licensed, and then there was Gilles' band. God, I'm going senile. Raw Stylus, which I think might have been licensed as well. And then the third one was mine, Palmskin. So it was right at the beginning, and there was like tiny budget. Like I recorded it it was like in a little garage unit in West Hampstead, with this lovely kind of jobbing engineer. And then James had said, I'd said I'd wanted to try a couple of different vocals and things, and James just sent a couple of guys down that he knew from West London, who just randomly kind of chatted over stuff, and then edited it up and put it together. But it's pretty much the sound of what I'd done on my Tascam Porter Studio. It was like, which is, I mean, I listened back to it, and part of me cringes slightly and feels like, oh God, I know so much more about production now. But on the other hand, that the raw stuff of your first experiments always sounds kind of nice as well.
Well, and so at that time, how was Mowax doing? Because I guess there was a time, almost it seemed to suddenly get together. I can't really remember the timeline of it, but early on you could see there was a buzz about James. I was just a record buyer. You would read Straight No Chaser and all that, and you knew, okay, he's coming. He's like a fresh person now in,
Yeah.
he was closer to my age, and that's what I remember. Okay, he's into his jazz, but he's listening to the new hip hop music, and it felt like it was someone who was a voice for a generation. It did feel like that at that time. But was it doing well straight away? I can't,
No,
I
I
don't know.
mean, how do you judge that? Because, for instance, you know, you might shift, definitely shifting, I think, at least 1,000, probably more 12s. But you're getting, the revenue from that. It's not like 1,000 streams. So it felt worthwhile.
Yeah.
It felt like you were getting royalties, you were getting money.
It's not like now where a record costs about £18 to manufacture, isn't it? So,
Well, exactly, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, again, when I think about those days, that I was skint, but I was still buying records every week, in a way that I couldn't. I mean, I bought. There's a independent place down around the corner that's opened up. Really, really great record shop called Cloth and Wax. Um, I bought 2 LPs there last week, and it was 50 quid. And I was like, and one of them, Adam, who runs it, he was slightly bamboozled me into buying. I wasn't even sure, and he was like, "You've got to have this." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And it was only when I got home, and it was a bit like a Jack and the Beanstalk moment of like, "What? These 3 beans cost 50 quid?" But so when you ask about how it did, and also, there were that fewer releases, so
Yes, yeah.
we were getting reviewed in all the good magazines. There was the Face, ID, Blues, all those different ones, Echoes, Street Soul. I think that was another one. Q, even the main, the broadsheets and things like that would, and so it was. I suppose what you didn't have from the internet was being able to reach loads of people, but because there was a limited PR media scene,
Yeah.
you also got noticed by the more people who were going to write about you. So it felt fantastic. It felt really. God, I can't believe I'm saying this because I'm not such a kind of jaded cynic, but it felt exciting. It really felt exciting because James was, he was such a geek, and he had that unashamed. You couldn't embarrass James. He just wanted everything. He wanted whatever he could hear, whatever he could see. He had a kind of vision. He was obsessed by Grand Royal and the Beastie Boys and this idea of having a kind of brand. And he obviously was, slightly under Giles's wing, and he could see how Talking Loud had done so well in that way. And it was also, historically, it was that time when, major labels were just, no one was interested because they turned into these kind of overblown dinosaurs. And, that club world, I was thinking about this the other day, that time when, every track would have 10 different house remixes that all had probably they paid a fortune for, and these kind of very polished kind of Ibiza tunes, and there was a really healthy underground that didn't want that, and Mo Wax kind of just came exactly at that point.
It sort of captured the moment, didn't it? Because I always think about that time because I was running my club. I remember at the time James did an interview with him, and him saying, because Ninja was going before, I think the journalist was trying to stir it up a little bit, as if but he was also saying, he sort of said, well, Ninja weren't selling so much till I started Mo Wax. And I remember at the time thinking, oh gosh, that's possibly true, because it wasn't quite connecting Ninja in the way that maybe Mo, and I remember at that time thinking, but then with both of them together, they just were it suddenly became this really great force. And I remember I was starting a club night where I always used to be frustrated that, oh, you can come and play, but you've only got to play early, or you can play the back room, you can't play peak time. So I started my night. So I guess that's what I always thought with Mo Wax and Ninja. They brought us to the front room, didn't they? And you could see when Mo Wax happened and was really kicking in, that we suddenly were getting a crowd that were asking for records that were released that week on Mo Wax, and it just had really brought everything together. So yeah,
it's interesting because it's it wasn't necessarily the music that a club would want to hear, in the sense of, it was going down really well, and it was popular, and it was trendy, and it was new, and all of that kind of thing, and interesting. But I mean, I remember going on some of the earlier Mo Wax tours where we were DJing in all over the country, and not amazing clubs, not the worst, but not amazing. And the first kind of half of the evening, there'd be like guys, slightly shoegazy, slightly chin strokey, nodding away to something kind of slow and thundering and trip hoppy. And that's actually what got me into wanting to DJ kind of house music more, because I'd start dropping house beats, and suddenly like people would come away from the bar, and and the guys in kind of £200 trainers that they brought back from New York would be glaring at me, but the bar staff would be smiling, and you'd think like, yeah, actually, that's an interesting thing. And again, it's that thing about the music you want to make and the music you want to DJ
Yeah.
is kind of different sometimes.
I think for me, I was slightly, because again it was another residency. And it was everywhere. I was a student at the time, and because I play records on the Unfold show, quite regularly, and say, oh yeah, we used to play, and I'm so surprised how slow the records were, but also there were big tunes. I remember Kev Beadle coming down and playing 200, the RPM, I think, track,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is,
yeah.
and
Brilliant.
everyone cheered when that came on. So we played slow, so I had a lot of smoking going on. So I guess that was part of it. And we'd get into faster, but those tunes in my tiny world in Brighton, in a club that held 150 people, it was like, they were big. But I understand that with the
Yeah, I mean,
sort
no,
of
but it's not.
house
You're
things.
right, actually, because there was a brilliant club in London called Slow Motion that was pretty much nothing over kind of 100 BPM, and maybe in some ways things like, I mean, us, trip hop, but Mo Wax and some of those other labels did actually open a door for a legitimate club night that didn't have to be fast, and and it wasn't just, maybe I'm being unfair, maybe it wasn't just chin stroking and stoners, but because you're right, there were a lot of brilliant slow tunes that people danced to. There was that Slam Slam track, Feel the Feeling, that
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like, like you say, I remember it now, of people whistling like, your anthem had come on, and then it's just like,
Yeah, I mean, for me at that time, we were playing a lot of that 90s hip hop that was coming out. There was sort of the indie scene, and obviously Tribe and all of that sort of brand Nubian, and there was so both of that scene together, it sort of fitted in with
yeah,
sort of tempo. We had the hip hop thing, but you had something just to break it up, so it wasn't too sort of testosterone with the hip hop thing all night
yeah,
as
yeah.
well, which that's it's so with palm skiing. So you did a few tunes, but then the album was, is that right? Is there an album with Virgin? Is that how? What
Yeah.
that was? Yeah. So
Yeah,
how,
so
how did that happen?
I'd done four or five EPs for James, and I did a little kind of alias one called Bubba Tunes. That was a kind of it was my. It's definitely an itch that I didn't manage to scratch. I was really into those AV8 records, those Armand van Helden hip hop cut up tracks. I think I've got all of them. I've got a shelf like that downstairs with where my vinyl is, and but I didn't really know how to do it, and I just wanted to do something kind of loop based. Anyway, so that was another thing that I'd done, and then at the same time we were doing the live residency at That's How It Is at Bar Rumba, which was Giles and James's night, and at a certain point in the night there was always a live jam session that was improvised, and whoever was in town, Giles and James would invite as a guest. So we had some
So
amazing.
were you part of the band, the
Yeah,
resident band then for
yeah,
that?
exactly.
Okay, all right, yeah.
And we'd turn up in the afternoon and set up and run a few ideas, but it was pretty much just on the fly. And so if DJ Crush was in town, he'd come and do something with us, and the Roots came, and Questlove sat in on the drum kit, and Tom Brown came and played trumpet, and Ice-T was there once, but he never rapped. He just sat behind the decks and looked terrifying. And actually, there's another story about Ice-T, but I can't talk about that. And so we were doing that, and there was Ski was involved in that, Ski Oakenfall, and Jeremy, my friend Jeremy Shaw, who did a thing called Naked Funk on Pussyfoot, and Jeremy was working with Howie B, and they were out in Spain, and they bumped into Nana Cherry, who was living out in Spain and working on an album and looking for musicians, and was about to tour. And Jeremy came back and said, "Look, I've been up talking to Nana and her husband Cameron, and should we could put a band together." And so we pretty much took the That's How It Is band. We went out to Spain to it was a session, I think, actually, a recording session. I was going to just play some congas, and then we were going to talk about maybe putting a band together for live. And I was booked to be there for 2 days. And again, the kind of energy of youth. There was a van going out there with equipment, and I put my congas in, and then I put my computer in, which again was not a laptop. This is a big, put my computer in, put in 2 boxes of records and a couple of synths, and turned up and kind of said, "Yeah, I know I'm playing percussion, but I also program and I also play synths, and I've got some records if you wanna." And I ended up staying there 2 weeks, and me and Naina and Cameron and Johnny all just really connected in a brilliant
So
way.
Johnny would be Johnny Dollar, is
Johnny
that
Dollar,
right?
yeah, John, and out of that came a few years of recording, producing, touring, in a totally different whirlwind of creativity, in the way that Mowax was one kind, and you talk about kind of hot housing. It was like fast track into kind of high end, major label, but interesting. Um, there's a reason why I'm talking about this. So out of that, they just finished working with Jeff from Portishead, who did quite a lot of work on the previous album, and Cameron had this quite James like eye and ear for who's doing something interesting, who's doing something new, and so he was interested in my production and stuff, and he was saying, "So what's happening with Palmskin? What is this?" And I was saying, "Well, it's Mowax stuff," and just at that point, James, it was really blowing up, and James was obsessed with Japan, and with Uncle was just kind of really getting kind of serious, and Shadow was blowing up, and I suppose I did feel slightly sulky, maybe a little bit, that I felt like those of us who had like kind of the homegrown talent, who had been working away and chipping away back at home, like us, me and RPM, and some of the others, and had really established the kind of feel of the label. Not to detract from James's A&Ring at all, because that was really an example where he was really curating very, very actively. But he'd suddenly just kind of, I was going to say bought in, but that's not fair, but kind of just got this huge package that was kind of already there. But it's what he loved, and suddenly everyone was going mad about everything Japanese, everything American, the Beastie Boys, Shadow, all of that. And I was feeling slightly left behind, maybe. And, the budgets were still tiny at Mowax, which was fair enough. I wasn't feeling hard done by it. It's just that's how it was. And then the next thing I know, I'm kind of, sitting out in a veranda in Spain with some of their kind of heads of Virgin, talking about, there's could be a deal to be had, and and it was just like, yes, please, and I think slightly, and I didn't enlighten them as to I thought they were wrong, but I think they possibly thought that they were poaching a great act from Mowax that was going to steal James's thunder, whereas actually I don't think James, gave a shit. He would probably be like, fantastic, do it, But I didn't disabuse them of that, and so I signed a deal to Virgin, which was amazing, and the deal was many, many, many times bigger financially than anything that I'd encountered before, and meant that I could, do incredible stuff in the studio. I was in really lovely studios in London, with lots of time, recording everything to tape. It was all just, it's beautiful.
There's quite a gap, isn't there? I think sometimes when we have new people coming to work with us and they're referencing what's going on at major labels, we really have to start doing a really quick fast track explanation. What we've got in the bank compared to what major labels is like, it's not even, it's a step, it's just a drastic gulf, isn't it? From being a sort of smaller indie, or even where we are, maybe mid-size indie that does all right, but majors is just a very different level of what goes on.
And actually, what's interesting is back then, music technology wasn't at all where it is now. And the fact is, I couldn't really have done very much out of the studio. I needed a studio. I mean, yeah, I could still be doing bedroom beats and bits and bobs, but you just didn't have the resources that you have now. And so now, you don't have, if somebody came to you and said, Rob, look, I need to hire this £1,000 a day studio to record trumpets, you'll say, no, you don't, and okay, not necessarily, but you
But
take
also you might say you can do that because the rest isn't going to cost, it's not going to be,
yeah,
there's a budget,
yeah,
like a huge
exactly,
budget for
exactly,
everything. So
yeah,
yeah, that is
yeah.
definitely different.
And I
But for
think that,
that feels like a journey, doesn't it? It's almost like it's an interesting thing hearing that, but you've been making like it's quite a natural progression, really, isn't it? And you're also quite motivated if you think from the point where you're at a club and your friends just go and ask. You've actually taken it to a level where I'm going to just pack everything if I'm going there. I'm going to take everything and do it, which is quite an interesting thing. There's an element that I guess I'm seeing it from or hearing it from the outside. You're pushing yourself and trying to
yeah,
be out there and making sure people know you exist, aren't you? So
yeah, and I
yeah,
think again, it's the kind of thing that I think you can get away. Unless listen, there are some people who are just incredibly self-confident and have this vision about themselves, and they can always, the Jay-Z's of this world or whatever, can you just know they know what they're doing. The rest of us, I guess, you have to do that when you're young, because once you get older, you just get either a bit embarrassed or you just feel it's rude or self-conscious. But when you're young, there's enough innocent energy that you're just discovering, and you're like, wow, this is great, and I love this, and I want to do this, and yes, I suppose, yes, that's right. Somebody else might have just kind of gone, oh, I've been asked to do this, I'll do that. But yeah, I
and,
very much was wanting to kind of show my cards, I suppose.
and it's been in a way really what you were doing. There was an element of sort of disruption going on, wasn't there? Because as you mentioned about, it was a bit stale parts of the major label music industry. There wasn't, which I guess every year you can do, but there's always a little kick that happens one way or the other. And I guess in your way, you're very much part of that. For maybe younger people watching this or listening to this, it was Mo Wax and Talking Loud really shook up a lot and brought something in. And it's nice to have those disruptors come in and just maybe reset everything and get people get two generations, an older generation into the rant to actually, I've got to pay attention to this and what they're doing is good. And then you bring a new generation into
Yeah,
good creative music. And I guess it's really what you were doing with.
yeah. I mean, historically, of course, capital, capitalism will always. It's like the liquid Terminator, isn't it? Because slowly, every one of those labels got bought, and some perhaps slightly more cynically, others just because it was, it made sense. But there was that brief thing where all those labels, like you say, the Ninja, Pussyfoot, Mo Wax, Dorado, Cup of Tea, Grand Central, all those kind of labels were, absolutely trailblazing. And after a while, the marketplace goes, right, we're taking you back in now, and we'll just give you enough money that you will just say yes.
Yeah, I guess Ninja is still independent, aren't they? I
Absolutely,
guess,
no, absolutely, of
yeah,
course.
yeah, yeah,
And look, and for a lot of the labels, it didn't mean that they suddenly ended up
yeah,
selling out at all.
yeah.
I mean, I think it destroyed James in the sense of, the classic rock and roll going off the rails.
Yeah.
He couldn't cope with the money and the drugs.
And he was young as well, wasn't he? He
Yeah,
was actually very young, wasn't he? So yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. I guess that goes on. I remember when we first started, we're doing well, and we had a few majors get in touch. But I look back and I look at myself being a bit naive because there were, people come in and I was going up to meetings in London, and the minute they started saying, "Oh, maybe Alice should change this and Quantic should do that," I was very much, no, there's no way we can do that. And then they just weren't interested at all because I was so forceful about, they're brilliant, just sign them and let us have your budget, but marketing budget basically, and their
yeah,
budget for music. But I look back and I was a bit more naive. What you said about Giles, now I could have been a bit more clever, going, oh yeah, that's good, but
yeah.
and
Well,
try and figure that out. Yeah, but I was so straight up about, there's no way we can do
yeah.
that. So
Well, same thing here. I mean, I've made a lot of mistakes in my past from doing that, and so what happened at Virgin was, what they wanted was, or what they hoped, I guess, was that I was going to do another, maybe a kind of Chemical Brothers kind of album or a Daft Punk album, because those, again, in that evolution of small labels getting big and underground music getting big. So those, was it Exit Planet Dust had just come out, I think it was, and Homework, and there was this huge market for underground dance music, but it was essentially quite banging. Now, what I should have done is, it was a 6 album deal. I should have taken the money and made an album of floor fillers, and then made an experimental ambient journey into sound. What I did was make an interesting exploratory ambient noodling album of exactly what I wanted to make, thinking this is brilliant, they're paying me to make the music I want to make. And I got dropped shortly after. So, but again, it was, it was in the top 100, the EP they released, it was kind of, back, and there wasn't much in the way of a marketing budget. There was, but, again, is that good or is that bad? Had I been more savvy, I might have, secured my survival on a major label.
I think you just sometimes, I think with these things,
they want.
So. I think I'm quite philosophical about all of this. All of these things are just, you're meant to do what you're meant to do, and you make mistakes, and sometimes you think you're making the right decision, and then you're making the wrong. I think there is
one of the tracks off that album, Walking Through Water, ended up on Harvey Keitel, Stephen Dorff, Hollywood, big budget soundtrack. Yeah. Now, had I, made something more accessible, I don't know, that track might not have been on it. I don't know. Although, so when that came out, I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, I'm on a Hollywood soundtrack. This is like, and I couldn't bring myself to go to the cinema. And I remember I was working with John at Westway Studios on, I can't remember what it was. It was something, it was a Pulp. We were reworking a Pulp tune. It was not quite a remix, but they wanted a restructure for a single or something. And we took a break, and I saw that this film, City of Industry, was on. And I was like, oh, look, we've got to take away. So we've got to watch this. We've got to watch this. My tune's on it. So the tune is like, it's a classic. It's like 10, 11 minutes long. It's this kind of, it builds and it builds. So we're watching the film and I'm thinking, when's it going to be? And there's a scene where it's a heist film. They're planning a caper in a bank job, And there's a scene, they're all in the back room of a bar, and they're talking about how they're going to plan the thing. And someone comes in from the back room, and the door opens, and you hear, and that was my tune. Literally, that was it. And I was like, maybe it's going to come back. Maybe it's going to come back. It doesn't come back. But it's on the soundtrack, so it counts, right?
I think, early on, I think we've had it. So I think there's a tune of ours early on. I think is it Limitless? And you can't hear it, you can't. And I remember going, oh God, this is going to be good. And then, so I've got very much used to that. But it's like, we sort of joke about those things. Almost in a way, you can't believe Hollywood would pay you thousands of pounds for a tune that you cannot hear in this.
Yeah. It's bizarre. So in my head, it was a nice, slow, moody build. I was thinking, this is going to be where, they're driving through an urban wasteland, and there's going to be flashbacks and a montage. And like, no.
Well, so when you were dropped, how did you take that? I know you're laughing about it now, but I guess one of the things that you've done is it can be very difficult to have what I call a career in music is, I often mean it from the creative sense, where you're just continuing to make music and release music that you just sort of really believe in. And I look at you as an artist from the outside, seeing what you've done with Free Range and your history and how long you've been that you do that. I know you've got other things that are going on, but there's always a space where you're putting out the music that you really care about and you believe in. So what is the process of getting dropped for a major? I mean, is it a shock, or did you feel it coming, or how's it done, or did you just get wasn't even emails then? You get a call from someone? Yeah.
Fax machines. Well, it was weird. It was, again, I mean, just as I benefited from being part of a kind of, when they thought they were poaching me, and there was a degree of something like personal politics going on, there was also there was some stuff going on with Nena and Virgin, and the Nena album was taking forever and was costing an awful lot of money. And I'd been introduced to the label through her people, and I think there was a combination of maybe somebody was trying to prove a point slightly, but also, as I say, the main thing was just mostly they were just thinking we're never going to sell any records from this guy. But I kind of sensed it was coming, and so the imprint was Hut at Virgin, that a guy called Dave Boyd used to run, which was, and Dave was lovely. Who else was on there? Placebo and David McCalman and Richard Ashcroft, and I can't remember that. What's his name? Uzik, the guy, Planet Mew. That guy. He was on there. Anyway, Dave was kind of. He let me know that they weren't sure what was going to happen, and anyway, so anyway, just one day it just kind of it was like, yeah, no, we're not going to do any more. And yeah, it was gutting. I was, because it was. I used to love walking into Virgin offices. It was just on the canal around where I lived. I used to like walking into knowing people there, being able to go and take records from the press department, and however much people want to be fiercely artistic and independent, being able to say to people, yeah, I'm on Virgin.
They've heard of it, haven't they? They know the label, isn't it?
Yeah, validation. You feel like, yeah, I've made it to a major. So obviously you're a bit gutted. On the other hand, the reality of the money side of things was, if I hadn't been dropped, it was a 6-album deal. I would probably still be trying to recoup money on that deal.
Oh, yeah.
It was £55,000 the advance. It was a nice advance.
Yeah.
Being dropped meant I didn't have to pay that back. So suddenly I've got this record out that it done well in its own way. It got attention. I was working with John because we'd started doing kind of production together. I was still working with Nena, and I had all this money to you can still make your stuff. You're still, you're all right. And so I came round to it. It was a knock, but I felt I still had an avenue to keep going.
And music industry is just this ups and downs to sort of carry on in there, isn't it? It's just, I think you can't do it unless you can. From talking to you, I can see you sort of joke about those things, but at the time they can be hard. And we get these ups and downs with what's going on with, even now you sort of feel with what's going on now that you can't press up vinyl. Like we've got new artists at the moment. We're saying to them, like you were talking earlier, it's so expensive to press up vinyl. And if you're a new artist, we might have to ask someone to pay £20-25 to buy that. And that's such a big ask in this current climate to do. And it's changing a little bit of, well, what do we do and how can we do that? And we're still very committed to vinyl. But I know we have these ups and downs all the time as a label, but we get through. But you do feel it, and you've got to just figure out how to move forward, don't you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But there was a lot. There was a lot going on. I was still doing. Was I doing that then? Yeah, I think I was still doing some like Palmskin live stuff, and again with there being a bit more money knocking around then. So even tried out like a 10-piece band at one point, and we were doing we did a thing at Ministry of Sound with Gilles and Straight No Chaser, and we went off to Japan, and there was a kind of Straight No Chaser all-star band, and it wasn't like all my eggs were in that Virgin basket. So that when it stopped, I was still DJing the whole time. I was still remixing. There were these various different projects going on. And then, the production work for other people. So it wasn't like, I should imagine if you're a band and everything is just that, and suddenly you're told you can't, and sometimes, labels will hold on to stuff as well. You might remain committed even though you've been dropped. So it was the nicest way of being dropped, I guess. You can be, I suppose.
Out of all of them, yeah. So, but yeah, and then so, I mean, you're involved in, after that. So, is the next thing after that the free range stuff? Are you doing things like that, or are you doing the production stuff?
Not at all. Yeah. So I was working with John on loads of stuff, which was amazing because it was first of all, it was like really, really regular work, paid work, but. Again,
what were you working on? What stuff were you doing?
Well, I started off doing programming with him, and synths and beats and things like that, and then increasingly got drawn into the production process.
I'm going to pause you one second. Just for, if people don't know, do you want to let them know a bit about Johnny Dollar and what he was involved in? Because for me, oh yeah, he's a legendary guy, but I don't know him, but I've seen his name on so much, quality music.
So, so John, oh God, I mean, have you got a couple of days? John, so when I first arrived in Spain to do this very first Nena thing, hadn't met anyone. Jeremy, who was doing it, and a guy called Kuni, who was a Japanese bass player who was in a band called Natural Calamity, who did a load of kind of very lo-fi kind of chill out stuff. And he was connected with Major Force and with Toshi and Kudo, who did all that stuff. They were already out in Spain because they were working with Howie, who was working out in Spain in Trevor Murray's studio. And so I flew out on my own. And because I put all the gear, my entire, the kitchen sink in the van that had gone off, I just had a bag of some clothes and stuff. And got there, I was flying with one other guy, who I think was Sam, who was assisting. He was the assistant engineer, and Sam went on to do 07.
Right.
We got off the plane, and Naina's husband, I think he was there, Cameron, and he had this big Toyota Land Cruiser, because it was all out in the countryside in Spain where they were living. And he said, do you want to, I can drive you to the studio. And then there was this other guy there who was like this kind of wild man of Borneo with this like huge hair and a massive, way before, the word hipster had even been born, just this huge, not hip at all, slightly more kind of hunger strike beard, leaning against a kind of clapped out moped and with a roll up in his mouth. And said, well, you can come on the bike. And, again, a bit like the DJ voice or whatever, or the kind of, and I was like, oh yeah, that's all right, I'll get on the bike. And then it just took me on this white knuckle ride along these like mountain passes right on the edge, laughing hysterically. And this was John. It was my first meeting of him. And then we got to Naina's house, and they all were living out in the countryside in these little houses in what's called the Campo. And the setup there was that John, Naina and Cameron had this kind of trio of writing, producing, kind of doing everything of her stuff, and then we're getting other people in. And I didn't really know anything about any of them, but I obviously realised later that, they'd been working with Massive Attack, and that John had basically written Unfinished Sympathy and had been writing with Yusun Dor, and then Portishead and Jeff. And just in a way that, I don't know how you put your finger on it or not, but John and I just were like, it was just amazing. And
you just clicked, basically.
We just clicked, and we just became like amazing friends. I mean, it didn't happen quickly, actually, because everyone thought John was the scary one, because he never said anything, and he just chain smoked roll-ups and chain drank coffee, and really didn't say anything. And he was also terrifyingly uncompromising in the studio. And later I discovered that he'd had an apprenticeship as a car mechanic, and it totally made sense to me, because he was not scared. If something didn't make sense to him, he would pull it apart until every single washer and cog and lever and cable was spread out on the floor. And then he would say, right, let's start with this. And he would do that musically. And I remember that there was a piano part that Jeremy was playing once in the studio that John slowly pulled apart and pulled apart and pulled apart until he was getting him to play like one note at a time with one hand. And Jeremy was almost in tears. And it seemed terrifying, and at times you might even think he was a sadist, but actually he was insanely shy. He just didn't really like talking to people, but all he was about was just making the music sound right. And once you realize that, it was just lovely and as nice as pie and really warm and really friendly and had no ego at all, but just felt like a total outsider and had no idea what he was doing. John always said he had no idea how to make a record. And every time we started making a new record was as if it was for the first time. And I feel like that. and I think that maybe that's how we bonded. Except he'd cut his teeth in mostly in reggae recording studios in Willesden, where you did not mess around with time. People had hired the studio for half an hour to do 3 tracks, and and he knew his stuff inside out. I mean, his engineering, his precision, his knowledge of technical production was jaw dropping. And his confidence. We did this REM track once. We re-recorded a new version of an REM track for a film soundtrack for a Danny Boyle film, and so all we were keeping was the vocal, and we turned it into a kind of electronic ambient thing, and we changed the structure, and all we had to work with was the original 2-inch of the track, their master, and we needed to edit it. And I remember John was there with a roll up in his mouth, with a 2-inch tape and a razor blade and a chinograph, and you'd find your cue point, mark it, move on, mark it, then with a razor blade, cut it, and you're cutting into the original tape. Once you cut it, you can't do anything about that. And he was doing it kind of almost nonchalant, because he just and I was again just learning process, just soaking everything up, and he had a way of making stuff sound so good and not moving on until it did sound good, and not settling for like, oh, we'll do that later. It's like, no, we're getting this right now. And that was just amazing, and it was, and I learned so much from that, and realized, at that point I was feeling slightly cocky. I was Mo Wax, and that had gone well, and Naina obviously was great, and we had an opportunity. We were on huge stages, doing brilliant, slightly kind of rock star gigs and things. And I dyed my hair orange, and I had this black beard, and I had a synth on a thing that I could kick a stand over, and I could and then I realised, oh no, you still don't know anything at all. You don't know anything, and so that was a lovely journey, and an amazing friendship. So when things went a bit pear shaped with Naina and Cameron and John, and there was obviously the when you're at that level, what's happening with deals and what's happening with money is a totally different universe, and there was stuff I didn't know about, and anyway, it turned into a kind of a split, and some of the people who we were working with Naina and Cameron, and I went with John, and I couldn't have done anything else, because by that point I felt like he was my brother. I felt and I've not ever really felt it in those words with anybody I've ever known. And so then we were doing all this kind of production stuff.
So you were doing some big names, weren't you?
Yeah.
Who were you?
I mean, yes, the caveat I would say is so much of it never saw the light of day.
Right.
Because again, and I've got, maybe there's a counsellor might tell me that there's a history here, but a bit like James, and a bit like Cameron, and a bit like Gilles, and all, these are people who were very single-minded, and John, he knew how to make a hit record, God, absolutely, but he also wanted to make the thing he wanted to make. And so we did some stuff with Pulp, we did some stuff with Depeche Mode, with Sarah McLachlan, with Utti Lemper, weirdly, with I can't remember, God, so many people, and Neil Finn from Crowded House, and lots of it, they just kind of say thanks and pay up, and then not necessarily release. I mean, one thing that did end up getting released, which was really weird, was we were doing this Youssou N'Dour album, and suddenly we were writing a theme for the French World Cup in I don't remember what year it would have been on, because I'm not remotely football. I'm 98. I don't know how the World Cups work, but it was when France won the World Cup, and at one point, even John tried to get us tickets to the World Cup final, and that was going to be the first football match I'd ever attended. And I was thinking, this is brilliant. So there was some random, Oh, and Gabrielle, of course, we did that number one. We did Rise for Gabrielle, which was
So the hits were there within all of that as well.
the hits were there, yeah. But yeah, it was an amazing learning experience, because it was still marrying that, you know, we were trying to put in the kind of textures that I'm interested in, and you know, John loved talk, and he loved you know, the not just bands with two names, but you know, experimental stuff as well, but also, you know, knew about how to make accessible, you know, popular music.
Yeah.
And that's always been important to me, is that it can't just pick up its own ass too much. It's got to still draw you in.
That's what I always think for me. I mean, I don't know, but you know, those bits of the pop music or more commercial inverted commas music that I've always liked. It's Johnny Dollar. He's involved in it. You would always see his name,
Yeah.
like quite consistently as well, and
Yeah.
always those things. They've just got that little edge, but there's a catchy song, but it's not cheesy, but it's quite, you know, it's a pop song. But which is, I you know, I don't know what type of skill you need for that. And as you said, I think also that mentality to be able to deal with that world of major labels and what goes on. I don't know what type of politics and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, John was amazing at kind of dealing with it and not dealing with it. Like he was amazing at getting a deal through. He would just, again, a bit like you're saying about it's better if a band talked to the manager. You know, early on he would say, okay, I want X amount of producer points, but from record one. There's no recouping here. I'm getting it from record one. This advance isn't recoupable. This is just an advance. You know, no reductions if it's on a compilation. No, you know, whatever. This is.
So he's really dealing with the business of it.
Yeah.
As well,
yeah. Because he just, you know, he didn't want to get shafted, and it didn't come second nature to him. And we'd spend, you know, he'd sit there at night going through contracts, but just on a kind of, I'm going to get what's fair. And God knows, you know, he'd cut his teeth and had paid his dues producing records that sold a lot for people. And I think he just felt like, you know, yeah, this is what I want. If you don't want it, then, you know, you don't have me. And that was, you know, I'd like to say inspiring, but I've never had that kind of balls. But also, you know, he'd do things like, if we had to demo up a record, you know, we wouldn't go and hire a studio that cost money. We'd work in his back room. He'd get the artist in. He wouldn't, you know, he'd say, listen, he lived in a, you know, a little terraced house in Kensal Rise. And he'd say, look, we can go to a nice studio with a beautiful bar and a view of the Thames if you want, but just come here, I'll cook lunch. And we'd record something, and we'd sit in a room quite often with a little, you know, portable tape machine, one of those little, you know, mini cassettes. And we'd do a version. And then he'd take it into the record to the A&R person and say, this is what we're working on. And sometimes, you know, they just didn't have that vision because they needed to hear a polished demo that would have cost, you know, 20 grand. But John was like, there's no point doing this. If you hear the song and it's going to work, then we'll start spending money on it. And it's better for you in the long run. But I know there were a couple of times where people were just a bit baffled by that and they wanted to be schmoozed a bit more. And, you know, and so he, you know, he was brilliant at that level, but he also was still had that slightly outsider thing.
But I guess all of this stuff's inspiring, isn't it? Just from the fact of it's sort of trying to follow your true path, isn't it? Within those business aspects that are there within the industry, and find your own way to sort of deal with all of that nonsense, isn't it?
Yeah, and if you're not a natural schmoozer or a natural wheeler dealer, then you have to do that because you've only got yourself. You haven't got those multiple faces to kind of say, "Hey, I can do this." Or if you're not a blagger, you know, it's you've only got your own kind of strengths to play to, I guess.
And that's I think sometimes creative people feel, oh, I'm not so good at doing the schmooze and all of that. And it's like, well, you don't need to. There's bits that you need to find some angles and things like that. But I think there is that. I think sometimes with new artists thinking, oh, you've got to be this all-encompassing person if you want to be an artist. And I think maybe if you want to be Beyonce and Jay-Z, you do. But I think in the world that, I mean, you went into major label world, but you, in the creative sense of just really following what you really believe in, that you can get through it. You know, if you're quiet and you haven't got anything there, okay, look, it will be tough. You've got to shout every now and then, and you have to. But
yeah, but you know, again, it's a bit like it's a bit like internet dating, isn't it? It's like back in the day, it was kind of. I'm so glad. I'm so glad I don't have to find a partner now because of what you have to kind of jump through. And it's like social media. I mean, in a sense, I'd go to NR meetings, with my stuff on cassette or with, on a DAT or whatever, and people would listen to it, and they'd say, I like it or I don't like it. They wouldn't go on SoundCloud and say, you haven't had a million hits, I'm not interested. They wouldn't look at your Instagram profile and say, I can't, well, you haven't got a selfie with Pharrell Williams. That doesn't, it's, I think it's harder now. You do in a sense have a million faces and have to already have it all there, because there's this pressure to be this all singing, dancing thing. And maybe the bad side of these incredible, inspiring entrepreneurs is that everyone's expected to be that. And actually, what happens to the introvert artist? What happens to the Kate Bush? What happens to the talk? What happens to those people who don't want to put their face out there, don't want to be sharing their story every 10 minutes online?
I mean, we are. I mean, we are quite vocal about, like, I've signed people who no social media presence at all, and new artists, and we've had, I think with Wheeler, he was doing really well in the first album, and we were getting so much stuff that was just coming through, and we were sending it to him, and then it was really freaking him out because he was posting when we started, oh, this has happened, and it was like oh, God, I don't know what to do. You're sending me so much stuff. And we said, oh, look, don't worry. We'll just tell you what's important, what's not, but we're just sending you. And I think we always try and get artists to understand that level. Look, if you don't have anything, I'm trying to sign an artist at the moment, which has been one of the most refreshing conversations with a deal with her, because she just said, look, I'm a bit shy and I don't actually want to gig. I don't want to. And I said, oh, I'm really happy to hear that, because I'm often saying, look, if you gig, you can do more gigs. But I said, just you being honest and saying that just means we can start this campaign knowing, look, she said, look, I'm going to try, but I don't know if I will do it. That we're starting a campaign, not thinking, okay, why are you turning down this gig? You should be doing this gig. And like, what can we do? Because the music's still good and she's a brilliant performer. And she's saying, I'll do something online. And I think that it's those benefits. It's like, look, she's talking, I can just do a performance and I don't mind doing that. And it will just be online, but I'm a bit nervous about performing. And I guess that sometimes it's, I hope there's a few more people being vocal about everything doesn't need to be on social media. You don't need to present yourself. I don't know if that's happening. I'm a bit older, so I know for me, I'm quite confident about what I put up on social media and what I don't.
So, just in terms of mental health and stuff, it's like, I felt, and not from any pressure from you or from Tru Thoughts, but, this release has very much come, the last, well, God knows, the second album I put out on Pussyfoot was 2020, so there was no social media and there was barely email, and I have felt slightly like, oh, I've got to make sure I'm putting out an impression of things are happening, and and obviously things are happening, so it's all right, but you're still kind of presenting a bit of yourself and a bit of your persona that in the past you didn't have to, just as you were happy that you DJ records and you'd cover up the label because you didn't want people to know what it was, whereas now it's all about full disclosure. Look at me. Look at what I'm doing. Look at who I am. And, God knows, everyone in different workplaces are asked to give too much of themselves. And I think, for young people, it must be really tough to calibrate, am I really having to pull my whole personality into making a go of a commercial release? Because fine, do that to the music, do that into your I was going to say tape, but what, into your hard drive or whatever, put that into your creativity. But God, it's a lot of pressure to be also seen to be the funky person or the happening person or the successful person or even the happy person. What about the miserable musician who's got bad vibes, who doesn't want it's really tough. That's brilliant to hear that she's able to be honest, though. That's fantastic.
And I think she's a bit younger, and I think that's what I'm hoping to see, because it feels a bit, that social media. I think, because I can be quite cynical about it as well, but I even as you're talking, there is a brilliant part of it where I remember, even with Bonobo, when we it was the first artist album we released, and when the good things were happening, it was like, well, but now how do we tell people? Because DJ Magazine aren't going to do it. Oh, Bonobo's been played by that. And, you know,
Yeah,
this has allowed us to say, you don't know this, but, you know, Bonobo sold 20,000 albums. I remember we've had that with Bonobo and Quantic and Belle Rouge, where people going, how's that going? And I would have to say, oh, yeah, we've sold 20,000 Belle Rouge albums. And like, oh, I didn't know. Whereas today, we would, you know, that goes on, you can say, or just the artist can say that, just be happy and celebrate that and say, and I think it does help. And I guess that's that balance that we try to say to our artists, just celebrate those good things that are going on, but don't feel paranoid if nothing's going on. Don't feel you've got to do something every day, and don't do things. I think you can sort of tell if people are sort of forced to be, you know, this is what I've had for dinner type things. And I guess for me, I'm always searching for music. I like to see if an artist, even if it's a 3-month-old post, but if it's a post of I listen to this album and I really like that it's not their album, I'm automatically thinking, oh, you love music and you're obviously doing other stuff rather than posting, you know, things not about music on social media. So I find you interesting. And so I think that it's that balance if you can but I don't know, we didn't grow up in this way, did we?
no, well,
So,
exactly. Absolutely, and there are huge benefits to it, and there is a hugely positive side. I suppose it's not also just about, like you're mentioning about you know, going up and checking posts and things, and there is that kind of, you know, the classic, the dopamine hit thing, is that, you know, all of us creative people have an inherent insecurity and a need to be wanted and a need to be heard, not necessarily from an ego point of view, but, you know, why on earth would you make music unless you wanted it to be heard, for the most part? And there is also that thing of waking up and the kind of, oh, nobody liked something about my music, nobody, you know, and oh god, I've got, you know, am I still valid, am I still, oh no, look, they've posted something else about, it's not me. And again, you know, I mean, yeah, we're old, and we know how to kind of box that most of the time. But if you're just starting out, you know, you could really go crazy worrying about that kind of thing.
It is a minefield. I know, because when I did Giles's show just before Christmas, and then I posted a picture of me and Giles together on Instagram. I mean, I normally get a few likes and it's all right and I'm happy with it. But I had, you know, probably, I would say 10 times more likes than I get for my average post. So that was going on for days. And I remember, you know, I had this feeling of, oh, that's brilliant, that's brilliant. And I enjoyed it. And I'm a fan of Giles and it felt brilliant. But I remember those 2 days after when nothing was going on. And I remember coming to the office and saying, we've got to remember, I'm going to keep telling this to because I was feeling like, oh shit, why am I feeling low? Should I post something? And those thoughts, and I could put them away straight away, but I'd said it to the office and said, look, remember, all our artists are going to be thinking like this all the time. We've got to remind them, don't worry. And it was a really freaky thing for me because I'm not the artist on the label, but it was my first probably window into that world of like, oh God, that is really...
Yeah. And in the old days, that would have just been the preserve of the pop star who got dropped and wasn't adored anymore. But now it's literally anyone who's posted something up.
And your maths is all relevant, isn't it? It might be, I normally get 10 and now I'm getting 2 likes. I'm normally get 100, but now I'm only getting 20. And it's like, what are these scales? What are you looking for? And what is going on? So,
I mean, I definitely notice on Facebook, you know, if I post a stupid joke, usually involving a picture of my daughter doing something silly, way more attention than anything to do with my music. Or a cat picture.
Yeah.
That picture was like, what?
It's the bit you have to get used to. Most people are following you for things away from music, aren't they?
Yeah, totally.
But as I said, I think there's positive things there as well. But it's getting that balance right. You know, with you know, how are you feeling where you're at currently with the way the music industry is? Is it, you know, where's your head with, you know, who you are and what you're doing? Are you feeling comfortable, or have you got sort of angst about things?
Oh, God, I never feel comfortable about anything. I'm always angsty. It's really nice to be on Tru Thoughts. I can say that without a gun to the back of my head. It's really nice having a multi-album deal, because it really feels like, you know, after Virgin, you know, I was putting out things I put a few things out on Pussyfoot, put the second album out on Pussyfoot, but that was always just a kind of a release at a time. The free range stuff, again, I mean, I don't think I was ever thinking about an album on free range, but because it was more that kind of 12-inch kind of house stuff. But again, never really feeling, it was never a given that there was going to be another release, or you didn't feel like I can start developing and continuity, because you're always bringing something like for the first time. So I'm really liking the idea that I'm thinking in terms of another album, and I kind of was, even when other times was still not quite finished. So creatively and as an artist, yeah, I'm feeling kind of, I wouldn't say secure. That's pushing it, but in a good place. And I know what I want to do. I know what the kind of thing I'm working towards. I'm just deeply unhappy with the country we live in and with the climate, and I feel like this country is in an abusive relationship with its government, and
My
everyone
wife says that to me when I was going, why don't people understand yet? Why don't people understand? And she
everyone
says,
still
uses that line, yeah.
everyone still is kind of saying, you know, maybe it's me, or you know, and not being able to say no. You know, I see footage of the cabinet, and I feel like I've been hit. I feel like someone has hit me across the head. I feel hurt. I feel attacked. So maybe it's not coincidence. Maybe I'm feeling deeply creative because these are times of great turmoil and upset. Maybe if everything was lovely and we all had universal basic income and we didn't have, you know, a racist, misogynist government in power, maybe I wouldn't feel like making any music because I'd want to go back to spoon carving or something because I feel so happy. But the fact of the matter is that's not the case. We have a hateful bunch of crooks in place who are experimenting in starving the poor and redistributing wealth to a handful of people, and we are just fodder within that machine. So, so I feel good and I feel bad.
I mean, that's it. I mean, that's what goes on. And I get, I mean, I sometimes have to be, you know, I'm like you, when I think the party stuff was happening. I remember coming down in the morning and I was saying to my wife, oh, this has got to be it. And she was just looking at me, she goes, they're still going to vote Tory. They're still going to vote Tory. And it's like, but I think I'm past that thing about, you know, I don't want to fight those people. I'm more trying to think, where do we focus? I think my view is speak up about this stuff. And if you're hearing people saying, you know, backing it up and saying, I think I'm feeling, I'm speaking, even, you know, the old taxi driver or one of the parents at school, if they say something I don't like, I'm speaking up now, which sometimes I've been quiet about doing, but I'm not anymore. I think
Which is fantastic. The problem is, how do you speak up against the Murdoch press? How do you
yeah, you can't battle that, can you?
decades and decades and decades of people cynically having been drip fed stuff to lead them to this point? I mean, that's what I feel about what the proposed, when they had the proposed pushback of small boats in the channel and the Rwandan policy for immigration. I don't think at any point this government ever thought policy. But if they were seen to be saying things like that, there are enough people in this country who, when it wasn't allowed to become law, would be saying, oh, you see, they're just trying to do some good. They're trying to help out this country, but they're being stopped. And it creates this kind of tolerance for outrageous things to say. Just like back in the day with Brexit, you know, James Goldsmith and whatever they were called, was it even before the referendum party? I'm talking like 20 years ago. They said some really outrageous, loony things about leaving Europe. And as soon as you've said them, they become slightly less loony. And the next time someone talks about it, someone says, oh yeah, weren't they talking about that a few years ago? So just like saying we should send terrified immigrants to Rwanda where there's a dubious human rights record and we won't have to deal with them, it seems outrageous. And then in a few years' time, when they suggest something maybe slightly less outrageous, people will have, that will become normalised, and people will be saying, "Oh yeah, there was a thing, wasn't there, about moving people to other centres, and there was a thing about that, and yeah, or maybe we should have some barriers in the channel to stop these boats coming across." And unfortunately, that percolates through all to like normal everyday people who aren't at all hateful and don't have a cruel bone in their body and wouldn't ever think of it. But the newspaper articles they're reading and the atmosphere and the world they're living in is slowly saying there is a place for this. There's a place to be able to say you can do this to people, and that's horrible.
Yeah. I guess. I mean, I don't know what's going to go on. I think. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I don't know. Sometimes, yeah.
That's why it's important, though. Like you say about speaking up, it's also important, and not to be self-important about the role of music or things like that. But just as you know, popular tabloid populist press drips down and poisons people's minds, so you know, bland culture does the same thing. And it's important to stay creative, and it's important to speak up, because, capital burns off the nuance in a culture. And when everything becomes about money, and everything becomes about hits and about sales and about likes and about reposts and whatever, it stops being imaginative. Just as the cuts in arts education, and it stops people being imaginative. And when you stop being imaginative, you stop being empathic. When you can't imagine how someone feels, you stop caring about them. And when you stop caring about them, the idea of society fails. So if you stop people being imaginative, the Tories have won.
Yeah.
So it's important that we keep putting out music, and it's important that people keep acting, and that people keep writing, and that people keep performing, because it fires people's imaginations, and that is the heart of caring.
And I think it's one of the other brilliant things about social media, isn't it? Because I think particularly when the Black Lives Matter thing was happening, I remember with the radio, because you were seeing just people making speeches in the street, and amazing speeches, just real people. And I remember, putting clips on the radio show, just putting music behind there. But I remember I started doing that and was getting so many, more feedback and reactions. Oh, that was brilliant, that speech. And remember, one of our shows hit 50,000 plays because this speech, everybody was like, this person had just done a brilliant speech. And I think just in the show, I put it just before that, there was a drum bass remix of 07, and the final bit was just as the thing dropping. It's like, oh God, that fits exactly. And it just sounded amazing. And it really just taught me, it's like, oh, there's so many people, we've got these people, okay, we're not the Daily Mail or Rupert Murdoch, but we've got these opportunities with pockets of voices that we can share that information with. And I think that's the good thing for everybody. It's not just about me because I've got a radio show, or you because you're an artist and you can speak. I think each individual person, even if it's 3 people, just share that thing you've seen, isn't it? Let people understand, because it might just move one from, oh yeah, that Daily Mail article was bullshit actually, because this person has really explained why that was bullshit in 1 minute, which often that's what you can see on social media. There's a 4-page article on Daily Mail and someone just says, that's not happening. Here's the proof. It's not true.
Yeah. I think it's, I don't know. I mean, I'm not, I don't have my finger on the pulse of any kind of, music that's being released in general, but it does feel like there are political voices missing. I would like to see more overtly political artists in lyrically, in stances, and that feels like, I'm not saying at all it's not there, and I'm sure it is there. And I think that it could be a time that it's beginning again. But the 80s and 90s, especially the 80s, there was just seemed to be so much more political music, and not political music was necessarily that out there either. That was readily accessible.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, I grew up, I remember sort of the Red Wedge things, and I remember it, I mean, it used to be Billy Bragg, but I remember them doing one that had Norman Cook and Cash Money and Marvelous playing it, because obviously they thought, well, we can't just do indie and the hip hop is happening, and it was like, oh, it was connecting just in a wider thing. So it's like, I guess I'm sure things are going on. I still feel hope. There's those little bits. I thought it was great what Stormzy did with the Brit Awards when they didn't know he was going to make the comment about Theresa May. And, that's a brilliant disruptor to have to someone who's now signed to a major label, and you hope, he's got some form of power there, and he feels like somebody who could bring, maybe in 5 years or 10 years, and start bringing those people who are going to sign this. It's not going to sell 1 million, but it will sell 200,000. But they'll talk about something interesting, and maybe those things, I've got hope.
Yeah,
we'll see.
We should do something. We should find a political voice to put on Tru Thoughts.
Definitely, I'm always saying that to all our artists. I love that stuff and want to do that. I mean, we did something at the time of the Iraq War too. So Full Love Cypher did a thing literally called Bush and Blair, and it got skits, and Roddy P weren't allowed to play it on One Extra, and then when we complained, BBC was saying we haven't told them not to play it, and our skits said, they're saying they haven't told you can play it, and he goes, no, I've been told I can't play it. So you suddenly find out all of this world that goes on in all, when you're doing political stuff. It's like, oh God, there is a system in place. It's not those conspiracy theories on YouTube. There is a system that is there, and obviously there's madness with those conspiracy theories, but there is also a system in place. So
yeah, totally.
Cool. Just before we go, I mean,
Yeah.
it's been really, really fascinating, this long journey. You know, I'm always look on these as, you know, if there's some sort of younger artists coming through and, you know, beginning to do stuff, you're older writer, you may not know, you know, deeply into all the world of what's going on.
I don't want to know about them. They're too talented.
But what advice, you know, what are the things that you feel, you know, is there anything that you feel you've learned from just this, you know, almost an, you know, from that percussionist going to ask Patrick Forge, I'm interested in DJing, to getting signed to a major, to coming back to, you know, what advice would you give to somebody who's like hungry but don't, you know, is feeling, you know?
I guess it's put it out, isn't it? It's put it out there. And nowadays, I suppose that is easier. It's harder because there's a gazillion things out there every day. But until you've actually, you know, it's no good saying I want to do this, or I'm going to do this, or, you know, can I do this, but I haven't done it yet. Get something out there that someone can hear that you think represents you. And, you know, and I was doing that with tapes and with DATs or whatever, and taking it to people and playing it, and has, you know, being in the record shop or going to the club and saying, can I put this on? It's got to be you've got to have your thing before somebody's going to want it. So if you don't have that, then everyone can say, oh, I'd like to do that, or I'm going to do that. Just make sure you've done it a bit, even if it's, you know, and it's even if you just put it up on SoundCloud, which is, as I say, it's a million times easier than back in the day where you'd have to press a white label or something, or, you know, just you know, sounds like Nike, doesn't it? Just do it, but just start your thing. Because the other thing, you know, everybody loves a gang, don't they? Everyone always, if there's a thing, everyone, like, think about, like, you know, well, the obvious thing is like Wu-Tang or something, but it's such a charismatic thing. But it still works with individuals. If you've got your thing that you like and your thing you're doing, someone is going to go, oh, what's that? What's that? Or I like that. Or so just start doing it, and you know, and don't expect you're gonna, you know, don't do it because you want to get paid. You know, even when you could get paid, you shouldn't be doing it because you want to get paid. You should just be doing it because you love it. Because, and I know it's a cliche, but it's that original thing in you that is going to be the thing that someone else can't do. Everybody can kind of chip away at making a commercial track, but nobody could do the odd quirky thing that someone else is going to be interested in, I suppose. I mean, yeah, I guess I still, you know, like John, I still feel like I don't really know what I'm doing. I never really know. I don't have a template I pull up every time I start a record. It's from scratch. I don't have a library of sounds. It's always like a kind of, oh God, what you know, I've got a kind of sound I dreamt of last night that kind of goes, yeah, okay, I need to put that in or something. I don't know, just start.
And I think that's it. And I think you're that brilliant example, because I'm always saying to artists, look, it's a journey, step by step, year by year, just try and do things. And I think in a way, look, if you're an artist, you would always hope, oh, I'm going to be involved with the number one. But your journey with Gabrielle and Rise there were steps and steps and steps and steps to get there, weren't they? Yeah. And I think you seem to, it was an adventure going on, and it worked, you know, quite nicely, you know, a lot of the time. But I think, yeah, that example that you said about, you know, getting dropped, it was hard at the time, but you had other things going on. You didn't put everything all in one basket.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I should say to all the heads of A&R at Universal who are watching that, of course, I'm not averse to revisiting that chapter. You know, should you happen to, you know, want to offer another multi-million deal, you know, of course, then
I'll shout out license deal through Tru Thoughts, please, as well, so we can get a copy. No, of course. But yeah, look, I think that's it. That's brilliant. This has been absolutely fascinating, Simon. So thank you.
One.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Good talking to you.
That's one.